All right, we are live. This is episode number 5 of Addicts in Recovery, or AIR, and we have brought Kevin back on to the show with us. Say hi, Kevin.
Hello.
He was really upset tonight. He said, I really, really, really want to come back on.
Yeah.
And so,
No, it's always nice to have his, he's got a lot of wisdom. He's a little older than us, and he's got a little experience. So it's nice to have him back, and you're always welcome.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. It's always nice to have another person around too to shoot the shit with. So
It's fun.
Bounce ideas off of each other. So before we start, I've got to make an announcement. I started a blog a couple months ago, and it's called Addict Abroad. And so basically, it's a blog about traveling in recovery and like going to different places, and finding sober things to do. And so, if you're interested in it, it's www.addictabroad.home.com. So
That's a great idea.
throw that out there. Check it out. That's addictabroad.home.com. Yeah, I'm gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, and you can always check us out on our Instagram page as well.
Yep.
It is Addicts in Recovery, or AIR. You'll see it, same logo as you see in the iTunes or Spotify or
Yeah, we gotta change that.
SoundCloud. Yeah, no, we'll come up with something a little more creative. We're still we're rolling through it for our first month of this. So, but yeah, tonight we want to jump into the word stress and what stress is, how stress affected us when we were doing drugs and alcohol, and how stress affected us after, and how we deal with it without immediately jumping into the quick reaction of fixing it by using drugs and alcohol. So I think, I think everyone deals with stress in their own ways, their own levels, if it's with relationships, children, work, college, school, whatever. I mean, everyone has it. I think it's a pretty natural thing, but I think there's a lot of unhealthy and a lot of healthy ways that people handle it. So that's kind of what we're going to chat about tonight. And
Because addicts, deal with stress so well. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. Gulp.
yeah, exactly. Oh, this drug will help me.
Instant fix.
So, let's start it out. What is stress? Did you Google that already?
I
The definition?
I was kind of going through different things, and it talks about, basically it says stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment or response. So the body reacts to these changes with physical, mental, and emotional responses. And it says stress is a normal part of life, and it says you can experience stress from your environment, your body, and your thoughts. So it is a normal thing, and then obviously I think our body and I think our minds, it's easy just to stay what we're used to, kind of hermit into that mode. And I think when things get thrown at you left and right, I think people don't like it.
Shocking. What? It's been so relative early recovery. It's been a while for me in early recovery, because as recovery grows, stressors change, right? So Mike, like how were your stressor? What were the stressors? Like, what were the big stressors when you got into treatment and left treatment and started the whole early recovery thing?
Yeah, I'll start early. So I kind of have always been kind of a claustrophobic person. I don't like tight spaces. I didn't ride in elevators after I got stuck in one for a couple hours. Fire department had to come and rescue us out. And for years, I didn't go in an elevator until I was 16 years old. We went to Mexico on a vacation and we went on the 13th floor, and I went up and down those stairs every single day.
Wow.
It was really weird, but and everyone deals with their own battles, but I've always kind of hated the tight, confined spaces. And when my wife was pregnant with our first child, I was on an airplane flying to Oregon to go up to a mountain bike race that I was competing in. And I had a panic attack. I thought, if this plane crashes right now, I will never meet my son. And it was just the weirdest feeling. It was and a lot of this started to kind of build bigger and bigger, because at that time I was drinking more and more, and not having alcohol in my system created me to kind of become more claustrophobic, more hermit. I didn't like leaving my house. I like kind of being in a comfortable setting where I could like do my thing. And I remember the lady tapping me next to me on the airplane. She even asked me, she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, what? It's like, is it that recognizable that I'm like doing that bad? And I just remember like being afraid of airplanes. And I thought, this is gonna be a sad life. I can't fly in planes anymore. It felt just like stripped away from me. And my stress level of that, like I would think about it, and every time I travel away far from home, I would just always think of the worst thing, and it paralyzed me. Like that's like the one word I could describe it paralyzed me. And I hated it. I didn't like it because I was always an adventurous person. Like I lived in the Caribbean for years and doing service stuff, and like I never had any issue. I was traveling on airplanes every 2 weeks, and never in a million years I would think that like that's a problem, that I could be afraid of an airplane. And alcohol really was the contributing factor on that. And I was wanting so bad to get rid of that, and I didn't know how. And it was really hard. And I remember like clenching my arm, my wife's arm, like flying to San Diego for a work trip. And I was just like, if I don't move, my heart can't stop. You know, like it just hold still and just chill. You know, and nobody really knew. I was very closed about it. I didn't really talk to my wife about it, and you know, it was terrible. I didn't like that. And so I wanted it to stop. I wanted it to end, to get rid of it. And, you know, it's starting to come out of the sobriety. It peaked even higher, you know, when I wanted to quit because I just didn't know how to quit. And my stress levels started to kind of spike, and then eventually they started to kind of calm down when I started getting the alcohol out of my system and getting into detox and going to treatment. And after about halfway 15 days into 30-day treatment, I started to kind of go away a little bit. So I don't know, that's kind of like my rehab stuff with stress and anxiety issues with it. And
I find it fascinating that, and I know that I am not the only one, so I'm going to use the general version of or addicts, I guess, in general, find that when they're experiencing this stress and this anxiety, their immediate reaction is, especially drinkers, is to, drink, right? And then that just like compounds on it though. The alcohol makes it so much worse, especially, I mean, it might not be in the moment, but like the next morning, dude, my emotions were so dysregulated. I mean, through the roof, I would get so much anxiety and so much, and have all this built up tension. And I wouldn't ever attribute it to the drinking. I would always just attribute it to,
that's life.
That's life, exactly. But a chemical reaction in my brain was happening, and it was causing, it was causing even more stress to add on to it.
That's how it was explained to me too. I've always had that. I was caught up in that problem, that dilemma of anxiety attacks also, and stress. And I didn't know that was the cause. Well, maybe it wasn't the cause, but it certainly made it worse. Is I would wake up in the mornings and immediately go into anxiety. And then I would drink to get out of it, and it felt great and comfortable, and then just repeated that over and over and over again. I was just locked into that entire scenario. I didn't have any education as far as, if somebody would have told me that
like the
alcohol,
solution.
Yeah, like I remember, why didn't somebody tell me this like years and years and years ago? And they probably had 100,000 times, and I just shut them out.
Yeah.
But I was locked into that same exact scenario you were.
But I think like it's hard though, because like you can't really it's hard to admit it, that you're like, okay, this is really the problem. Because I remember so many times that if I didn't get like blackout drunk at night, then I was like, okay, it would wake me up at like 3 a.m, and I would have like my heart rate would just be fluttered and just felt like shit, and I was just like, this is insane. But like the times I really go like all in and go blackout, I would sleep through the whole night, but then you'd wake up in the morning and like what you're saying, you're just like, what in the world's wrong with me? I hate this.
Right.
So, I think it's hard that people don't like change. And I think when you are comfortable and even in an unhealthy, uncontrollable state that you're in, you're still feeling like you have, like, that's just what you do every day. And people get stuck and sucked into that same pattern. And I feel like it's really hard to, to kind of snap out of that. I think people just get, at least I would just felt like that's just what I do. It was never ending.
Absolutely. I didn't realize exactly like especially I didn't realize how much of the stress I put on myself. Like I would always be going, and I mean, granted, like meth addict, like I was always moving and I was always stressed and I was always, but it was always, any time that like I would go on these, because I would have these benders, and anytime I'd go on one of these benders, I just knew immediately that something was going to happen. Like something bad was going to happen, something catastrophic was going to happen, or whatever else it may be, and I was going to have to deal with all this stress. And it really came down to, it was the drug that was causing all of that stress. Life was just happening the way that it was happening, but I would create this stress in my head and in my mind, and it would just become this like catastrophic thing. And it took a lot of therapy and a lot of like time in recovery to realize that I got 99 problems and I am every fucking one of them.
Right. but I feel like people have like this false assumption that if they get rid of something, like they like accomplish, like say for example school, they're done. Stress is like complete. Like stress lowers down and you're like, okay, no more I don't have it anymore. It's gone. But like that's just part of life. If you get in a relationship with somebody, there is stress. You have children, there's stress. You buy a house, there's stress. You buy a car, you have a paycheck. There's always, you're never just like content. There's always something, and it's really hard for at least me to kind of like, I'm sure everyone can, I'm speaking we can agree on hopefully at this, but is when that happens to you, what do you do? When things get thrown at you, what do you do and how do you handle it? And that's really have been a hard thing for me, because I would always just jump in and be like, okay, solve it quick. And usually that contributed to alcohol or me pretending like there was not a problem, and I would just be closed-minded to myself and not speak and communicate with my wife or my friends or my, coworkers or whatever. And I feel like, I don't know, I didn't like, I don't know. I don't know how to say that, but like say this, but it just, if I was kind of lying to myself of like jumping into a hoop of saying, okay, you're okay, but you're really not.
Yeah.
And just being like, okay, now when something gets thrown at me, it's a big change. I can actually say to myself, hey, Michael, this is normal. You have a situation, how are you going to handle it? And there's not a right or wrong way most of the time of how you're doing it. It's just like what you do, just follow through with it and you're going to be fine.
I think the number one thing, I mean, there's so many ways of coping with stress, and there's so many ways of dealing with things that aren't going right healthily. And there's also so many ways of dealing with it in an unhealthy manner. And I think I like to focus on the stuff that like you shouldn't do, because that kind of emphasizes kind of what you should do. And the number one thing that a person shouldn't do, at least I'll start talking in personal experience. The number one thing I can't do to solve anything stressful is to get loaded.
Yeah.
Like that always compounds on the issue. That always makes things worse. The first thing I put in front of my recovery is the second thing I'm going to lose. And if I put anything, like any type of substance in front of these problems that I have to try and ease them or to try and take the edge off, then not only am I going to lose in whatever it is, I'm stressed about, then I'm going to lose my relationships, and then I'm going to lose this and that and this and whatever else. And it may not be, immediate, but it's going to happen.
Right.
Like, it's going to happen. And so I think the number one thing to start off with, especially dealing with stress, is recognize that it's, for one, if a person is really stressed out, they're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so they're easy to, and I was actually just experiencing this the other day. I was like super stressed about something, and a thought crossed my mind. It's been almost 5 years that I've gotten high, and the thought crossed my mind, man, it would be nice to get high right now. Because I'm vulnerable when I'm stressed. And so one of the things that I have to constantly remember is, even if I am in a state of stress, I cannot use. I cannot do it. Because especially when emotions get involved, it almost somehow you can convince yourself, and I mean, it's not even somehow, addicts can convince themselves to get high just about anything. Oh, the sun came up this morning. Looks like I need to get high, or,
Wow, it's a beautiful sunset.
It's a beautiful night. Let's drink a beer, or, you know what I mean?
So let me ask you a quick question to jump back into what you're saying. So when that happened to you, that you felt like, oh, I want to go get loaded, how do you personally walk yourself through that?
I immediately, so I've been practicing this for a while now. When I get the thought of drinking, especially under a stressful situation, sometimes I actually laugh at it, because I'm like, yeah, that's going to help.
So humor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll look at it, but a lot of, especially early on, I had to play that tape through. And okay, so I want to get messed up. Why do I want to get messed up? Well, because I don't want to deal with this anymore. It's uncomfortable. Okay, well, is that going to solve this situation? Probably not. And honest to God, if I try and approach the situation drunk, it's not going to end up the way that I want it to end up anyway. So it's just a double negative. There's no win, right? And so I had to play those tapes through constantly. And now, after doing it for so long, it's almost like a blip. So I'll get that thought, I want to get high, or, I really love, this thing that has been going through my head lately is craft beer. Uh-huh. Like, I used to love craft beer. And so I see somebody drinking a craft beer, and then immediately it goes through my head like, man, life would be so good with this craft beer. I'm like, yeah, life would be good as a raging drunk. Because that's what happens. I'm an addict. I've been an addict since, childbirth. There's no changing that. And what there is changing is my decisions on whether to act on it or not.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's just recognizing that the thought is there, and then playing it through, and then realizing where it's actually going to take me. I think that's kind of yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you totally. And I think everyone has to get to their own level of understanding of themselves. I think people struggle. I struggle with, of being honest with myself of that. Like, for example, I just got back from a big family vacation. We were in a car for a long time. My sister was in from New York. They have their first child. And I was kind of teasing them because it is their first child. I have 3 now. So watching people on their first baby is kind of comical to me now, because everything is a big deal. and it really is a big deal. It's a huge life change for those people that had their first child. But it was funny to watch them where they're in the car and okay, we got to go. The baby's asleep. Let's roll. And I'm just I kind of look back at my sister and I'm like, so we still, if the baby cries, it's okay. We don't need to book it down the freeway Mach 10 just to get to where we're going, because once we get where we're going, you're still going to have stress when we get where we are, at the finish line of the day. It never changes. You just have to kind of cope and adapt with it. And it's that's a very hard lesson that I've learned, because I would just be oh yeah, well, I can't wait for that beer at the end of the day. And it just gets not a beer. I'm lying.
Right.
Beers, plural.
It's the first thing I picked up on. Who has a beer?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, what's up, Kevin?
Well, first, I just want to say that I've never heard of craft beer, and I drank a lot of beer. But The second thing I wanted to say is,
What about crap beer?
yeah, I've had crap beer. I'm familiar with the crap beer.
Okay.
We're
But
from Utah, man. You gotta be familiar with it.
the second thing I wanted to say is, in early recovery, I absolutely hated that saying of play the tape all the way through, because it sounds really condescending. And I think a lot of times, well, for me, in my story, a lot of those one-liners that they say in meetings all the time, I got tired of hearing them because I didn't know what they meant. And it sounds like adults talking to a child. And I couldn't accept the fact that I was a child in early recovery. And I really was. I was so completely emotionally underdeveloped because I'd been drunk most of my entire life. So I think it's safe to say, and maybe hard for some people to accept, when they have as long as a drinking history as I have, that they have to accept the fact that they were at some point emotionally arrested. And you don't develop those kind of emotions or the skills to handle stress the way a non-addict gets, you know. I don't know what it's like for a non-addict. I'm not a
normie.
non-addict. So I didn't mean to offend anybody, but I just, you know, because stress is stress. But I want to be able to put it out to a newer person in recovery that may be listening, that one of the things that I think helped me in early recovery is to trust someone else when they said that even though I wasn't drinking, and it had been like 10 days, which I thought, you know, I was an old timer at 10 days, you know, I'm like, I haven't drank for 10 days. I'm sober, you know, and it takes quite a while for your brain chemistry to, you know, level out. And, but I needed to be able to trust somebody, find somebody that I trusted when they told me that I was viewing the world wrong, that things were slightly askew. Because the way I interpreted problems or situations that caused me stress is, I thought they were a part of me. That the stress and my problems were so in my head, I thought that they were like literally a part of who I was. And when they said things like, you know, when you stop drinking after some time, that stress literally takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be true. I just found somebody I trusted that I listened to, and I literally stayed sober because they said it was a good idea. That this would, you know, that this would actually, the stress would take care of itself. I didn't know what that meant. But after a certain point, and I wish I could say, you know, it was 32 days, you know, or something like that, because that's what a person in recovery wants to hear. They want to hear, you know, when are things gonna get better? You know, I can't say, you know, in 6.7 hours you're gonna feel, you know, it's different for everybody. But what I did find is that the problems and situations that were causing me stress, I was able to, instead of being on me and surrounding me, because I realized that I was so involved in useless problems and situations that were surrounding me, they were hard to focus on. They were scattered. I couldn't get a straight line of thought. But what I found is that I could literally like move them off of me, almost like I would be able to pick up the thought, and I'm using my hands, you can't see that, but pick up the thought and put it in front of me, and I could view it as something that I could fix. This is, say, like bills that need to be paid. I remember thinking when I first started this program that what I really needed to cure me was a loan You know, like how about like $100,000? Like then everything would be fine. But like I was literally able to those problems were if I can hold them away from me, I could look at them as something almost mechanical that I could fix. I could identify, oh, this is what's wrong. I can take this wire and connect it over here, and I could view them a little bit better in that way. But it wasn't until I decided that I just needed to trust somebody, that maybe my mind and was so alcohol soaked that I needed to trust somebody that I was looking at the world askew. And that stress became more manageable. And yeah, so does that make sense?
No, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. The main thing is it worked for you.
It did.
You know, and I think, like what I said earlier, everyone kind of has their own path. And, you know, one thing that helped me was a new style of communication, of how I talk to people, especially my spouse. My wife, I would be like, closed door, you know, because I thought she was, of course, it was her problem of my alcoholism. And I'd be hiding everything around the house. And I was just like, felt like that I was obviously being very mischievous. And it changed when I got out of rehab, and also during rehab when she'd come up and visit me, that my therapist told me to just be with her and focus with us and like what we are dealing with, you know, slow thoughts, not just like next year or a month or whatever, but it's like literally taking it just a step at a time and talking those things out of the normal day-to-day stuff. How are you doing? What are you up to? What can I help you with? How are you really feeling? You know, and that really made a huge change and a huge impact in our relationship, that we were able to be like raw and honest with each other. Like even last night, like I was just not feeling all that great. I was just like stressed out with work, and my wife, she brought in a game and we just started playing Bananagrams. You know, we play the little dice play words with each other. And I didn't really want to play that, but like we started playing it, and after like I just kind of talked to her. I was like, "Hey, thanks. Like this is fresh to be able to like turn off the mind." And then she just asked me simple questions like, "How are you doing? I can tell you're stressed." And just like walking through that of saying, "Just hear me out. Here's work. This is what's happening." And I'm like, it's nothing that she really cares about. I mean, she does because it's me, but it's not stuff she's going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to remember this. This is cool shit." It's just, you know, whatever. So I like that part of it where we're actually like turning off all of like the movies and social media and just whatever. And we give kind of a block now, try to at least, and kind of just chat. And that alone, like I just like walked away. I was like, yeah, let's go to bed. You know, I feel like way better. And it really helped my day today. I woke up this morning, I got so much shit done in my office, and it really can like be a big change if you start to learn to adapt that. And the biggest thing that after you talked a couple weeks ago, when we talked about, you brought up the word curious. Mm-hmm. And that has been really like a huge impact on me. It's like, I love being curious of something, like, you know, trying something new and being vulnerable myself and people I'm dealing with. And it's like, it's made my stress. So thank you, by the way. It's been really,
welcome, guys.
but I don't know. That's just my thought. So
I just, if I can tell like a little story, basically, I had this, I was in terrible financial stress. I had been drinking nonstop for, I don't know, 35 years maybe. I'm
33.
It's incredible I'm alive. But like, and I mean that actually. But I was in dire straits financially. I'm still not good at it, but I'm much better. But I remember I used to throw my bills on the table. 'Cause I was one of those people that developed little isms over my drinking career. super irrational stuff. But one of them was when I knew I was behind on a bill, my solution to it would be to throw it on the table and not look at it. I couldn't even open them up. And or if I was late in paperwork or something at my work, that would stress me out. And so I would avoid it instead of taking care of it and catch up on it.
Yeah.
And I had a sponsor. I went the AA way, like I said before. That's part of my story. But he would tell me, "Oh, those are paper tigers," and I'm like, What is a paper tiger?" And what it was basically is if you let something build like that, it becomes looming and crouching and scary. And the longer you wait to pick it up and take care of it, it becomes a tiger. And you'll constantly live in fear. And so he would call him a paper tiger because when you opened it up, it turned into paper. And you just took care of it. And I know that sounds really funny, but turns out it's the truth. You can call these people, and lo and behold, you can make payments on things. And sometimes they're just happy that you called.
Yeah, they're like, oh.
They're like, oh, hey, and so and not only in bills, and that's the whole moral of that story isn't just about paper tigers, the real paper ones, but things like social stress, like you've gotten an argument with a friend or anything to that extent. Nowadays, I try to avoid stress, and there's no way that everybody is going to avoid stressful things. We have life, and part of sobriety is learning to live with life on life's terms. But for me, if I'm in an uncomfortable situation or I've offended someone, I don't let it build into stress if I can help it. I attack it immediately because it's a paper tiger. If I don't take care of it. There was something that I actually read just the other day, and it was saying that most social awkwardnesses in life, when you've offended somebody or say a friend of yours at work, their spouse died or something. And I'm stealing this from a book I was reading, actually.
What was the book?
It was Brene Brown's, what's that one?
Dare to Lead?
Dare to Lead. She uses this in her book, and I thought it was amazing that, say, a friend of your spouse died, and you thought, well, I really should call them and say, hey, I'm sorry, or send a card or something. And then you're like, you make all these little excuses, and you can apply this to any scenario in your life. You make all these little excuses like, they're probably swamped with family right now.
They're dealing with like the eulogy.
They probably got
arrangements.
3 bowls of Jell-O today. I'm not
Right.
going to take over, a plate of food. And then the next day you're like, kind of feel like, well, now I shouldn't call because I didn't call. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you see them in a grocery store and you walk down the other aisle or something because you didn't call. And we play out these little tiny scenarios in our life that cause us stress, and it builds and builds and builds. The point of the story is they did a study which said that the awkwardness, if you address that paper tiger, even after a year, say it's never too late to make an amends. The awkwardness of that situation when you actually approach it lasts 6 seconds until things are better. So if you can walk up to somebody and that whole nerve-wracking stress that you've built up for years, or maybe just a couple of weeks, because you don't want to approach this problem or that person, all that stress you've been carrying around unnecessarily, when you attack it, it literally takes 6 seconds to break through that wall of stress until things are better.
I believe it though. I mean, because it feels relieving. Like when you have a situation like that, or like you built up something in your head, and all of a sudden it pans out, and it's like nothing what you thought it was going to be, and you're like, okay, well that was definitely a lot of waste of time,
Right.
I'm really good at that. I am really good at creating these situations that aren't situations. No, I really like that paper tiger thing.
That's
It's-
the new irritating recovery saying now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like play the tape all the way through.
Play their tape all the way through. Don't make a paper tiger. I think that is actually something that I do on a regular basis. I guess that I have to challenge myself on doing is creating these stressful things that aren't initially supposed to be that stressful. I think the hardest thing that I have is like tough conversations. I hate hurting another person, and I hate the idea of that. And so it's really hard for me to have a tough conversation, especially like with like a significant other, like my girlfriend right now. I have a hard time with the tough conversation thing. And so what I do is I'll just let it build. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's so bad. And I let it build and I let it build. And then, and I don't realize that I'm doing it, but what happens is when I don't appropriately deal with it, it creates this stressor in everything else. And it's like what you said, when you don't have that level of communication, it can build, and then it comes out sideways. Like it comes out in different areas. Like we'll get into a disagreement about something different, and then the kind of stress and I guess almost resentment, I guess, that I built up, that energy comes into it when it had nothing to do with that in the first place. And so I have to remember that like creating these paper tigers or making mountains out of molehills, which is another wonderful AA saying.
It is.
I have to remember that it may be uncomfortable and it may be hard to face, but it's so much easier to face right off the bat than it is to create this, than it is to drag it on, because 9 out of 10 times, like it snowballs and it snowballs fast. And then once that snowball turns into an avalanche, you think, all right, this is just gonna, end all of existence. And then you walk away. At least I do. I think, okay, this is it. This is the deal breaker. Like, this is going to be some big blowout, la da da da. And then I say it, and she goes, okay.
And you're like,
and I'm like,
why didn't I do this earlier?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Why didn't I say this right when it happened, to avoid the 6 seconds of discomfort?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
In addition to that, too, kind of following line at that, but I think there is a difference between like being a jerk and like trying to, and just being honest about how you're feeling.
You got to have tact with what you say.
Yeah, because like there's been many situations where I just like am ready to go and like freak out, and then like you said, it pans out of being like a very healthy thing. And if it's with my wife or with my boss, who's also my dad, in a family business, and how we perceive things and do things, and my older brother that works with me too, it's like it's very different when you actually have like a level playing field of communication, and it kind of eliminates all that other stuff around you. You hone on that, you're like, okay, well, it's not as bad as I thought. I don't know.
No, absolutely. I think that I think that just humans in general make problems much bigger than they need to be.
Right.
And I think that initial avoidance of the discomfort is really, and I mean, especially addicts in recovery. Like if you think about it, addicts are born to avoid discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
So even in early recovery, man, it just happens. It happens, and it's almost an instinctual reaction to avoid that. And so it's like in that book, the Brene Brown Dare to Lead book, she says, lean into it.
Right, she does.
It may be uncomfortable, and it may be the thing that you don't want to do, but with stress and with things like that, lean into it, handle it, take care of it, make it a point to get it done, so that it doesn't turn into this boogeyman that sits on your shoulder.
Well, it's different too, because I think at that point, because like there has been times where I did avoid it, and I like the analogy of like tiptoeing around eggshells around my house, and like, okay, I have to like kind of massage this question of something. And my biggest change now that I have done with my wife is like, if I have a thought of something, like, I really want to go on a mountain bike ride. And there's been times in the past where she was maybe confused of my intent of what I was really going to go do. You know, if I was going to go on a mountain bike ride or like whatever, or if I had something behind that, and like, well, why would you want to go do that? And for me now, it's different. Where if I'm feeling it, I say it. You know, I feel like I need to go do this, and not making it like a selfish thing. Because I think there's a big difference too. Because you could be completely selfish and kind of an ass about stuff and be like, this is, yeah, I'm a man. You know, this is you know, pay the bills and all that, you know. I do what I want to do, and I feel like there's kind of a fine line with it of kind of that self-need, and that's what my therapist taught me when I was at Brighton, to kind of remember that of like, when you're feeling something, it is a real feeling, and, you know, go do it. And if it's in the right setting, right timing, you know, so like it's been a really healthy thing, because my wife at times is like, you know, I really like to hang out with you tonight, and she's telling me what she needs, then I'm also telling her what I need too, saying like, yeah, that's great, let's kind of like plan it out a little better. Like our scheduling has been better of like things that she wants, things that I want to do, and it kind of eliminates the kind of the elephant in the room, versus of just like coming home and having like just mad, like I wish I had more time to go do something, and I'm just like stuck, you know. So I don't know. I got a question for you though, Zach. So you're in school right now. How do you deal with school stress?
School stress. When I first, all right, so this is how I initially approached school, and it was like the hardest way possible. I'm not even kidding. So my first 6 months of school were not at a registered university. It was at a tech college. And the reason I was at this tech college is because it had a self-paced math learning program. And I hadn't taken math in like 7 years. And so I knew that like the biggest thing beyond wondering if I had the capability of learning was this whole idea of I have to take and pay for all these math classes, right, to get to just a general level. So say for instance, and I don't know the order that they go in, but it's like 880 and then 990 and then 1010 and then like 1050 is supposed to be the one that actually counts. So that's 1, 2, 3 semesters of math at $1,000 a piece or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of money and a lot of time. So I spent the first 6 months just doing math, and I taught myself algebra. And not even kidding. I taught myself algebra, and I taught myself like pre-calculus just so that I could get into a decent math class. And that, just approaching that one subject, gave me a ton of confidence. I was so scared that I was just going to fail out, and that I wasn't going to be able to handle it, and that I wasn't going to be able to do what a normal quote-unquote college student does. And what happened was I got that math thing out of the way, and I tested into the class that I wanted to test into. And man, my confidence just like exploded. But then then I finally went into this university, and to put it lightly, I was absolutely terrified whether or not I was going to survive. I had some pretty easy classes, but one of the things that I did is I carried this notebook around, and in each class I would write down, this is like the to-do list that I had to do. And more than anything, it wasn't necessarily to remember, it was to ease my anxiety about, did I get that done? Did I not get that done? And so I would have a little pocket notebook and a pen, and I would check shit off. But it was always one thing at a time. Right, I could look at my 6 classes or whatever it may be. I think at that time it was 4 classes. I could look at my 4 classes as a whole, and look at this 16-week schedule, and that's what I would have done before I got into recovery. Is I would have looked at it as just this huge behemoth of a thing that I have to do, and what I would do is just every day I would just take it. Man, this sounds like, now that you talk about like
one day at a time.
Yeah.
one day at a time.
We're all just cliches.
No, you can't eat an elephant in one bite.
Right?
That is exact. But I mean, that's exactly what it is. You know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I did one assignment at a time, one project at a time, and I would set these goals for myself to get it done, and that was just top priority. And what happened is I did have like some stress levels, but I would knock my assignments out, especially if I had free time. I would knock them out like a week in advance. And so when finals came around and when like midterms came around and all the other students are freaking out and like ripping their hair out and studying like
shouldn't have
crazy.
procrastinated.
I should have procrastinated. Yeah, I'm out there rock climbing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it, especially with school was a lot of one bite at a time, and to not be scared of it. That's the thing that like school with me, the stress is one thing, the fear of it is another. I never thought I could even learn like my ABCs, and I already knew those.
Yeah. No, I have a hard time remembering school, but yeah, I can relate on. So my father, he is a workaholic, and
I know how that goes.
and never always struggled with like shutting it off, you know, and having the concept of saying, I need to stop here because guess what? Shocker, there's always something to do tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know if he's just like really loves it or his hobby or whatever, but I've caught myself of like doing that. I'm kind of going down obviously his genetics. He's my dad, and there's a lot of stuff that I am very similar with him, and I've like learned to kind of just like take the stress of like, oh my gosh, there's so much to get done and I'm behind or whatever. But at the end of the day, when like the end of the time of the day comes, I could sit there until midnight to 3 or 4 in the morning or whatever, but kind of taking more of a healthier line or healthier approach of it, I've kind of taught myself of like, okay, where do you need to stop today? And how are you going to do that? And it was
That's
really
a
hard.
skill in and of itself.
Yeah, and I still struggle with it because there's still times where like in the construction industry, when you're building stuff, it's obviously there's timelines and time frames and trying to get kids into school, and then you're doing stuff like that. So there's a lot of high anxiety, a lot of stress, but being able to be okay with like, okay, this is my cutoff because tomorrow I can just wake up and do it. And then another healthier approach that's helped me with my stress of not taking my work home. And I envy people, like, for example, I was talking with my brother-in-law when I was on this family vacation. He's a nurse in New York City. And I'm just like, dude, I love the fact that, like, you go to work and you go home from work and you don't give a shit about work. Because you can't do anything at home when you're a nurse. You're just like, okay, I did my shift, and you leave and you go home. And I was like, that's pretty rad. I'm not like that, but I'm like trying to take some of that in that he has and be able to like adapt that to me. Be like, okay, I'm gonna go home, and if something's really bothering me, my wife's asking me about it, or she's asking me about a project, whatever, I like will fill it in. But it's nice to be able to kind of like turn it and shut it and leave it at the office, and then come home and be like work dad or dad, not work dad. You know, and that's one thing I've always envied with my dad, and I have high hopes I can do that because. Kind of funny story. My dad and I, one time we got in an argument. Not one time, there's always arguments. But we're huge Utah Jazz fans. And I was building a house, and we were living in his basement as I was building the home. And we got this argument at the office, and I was just like, dude, this, like, can't believe this. My work, this, whatever. And as I was driving home, I realized I was going home to his house. I was like, oh, shit, I got to go see him again. And, like, I pulled into the house, and his car was already in there, and he was just like, hey, Michael, do you want to watch the Jazz? I'm just like, screw you, march downstairs. Because he's always been really good at that, like, when he does actually get home, even growing up, it was pretty shut off. He's dad at that point. And it kind of gives me hope that I can do that, not just like because I think people get stuck in that. They can really apply all of their work and just make it them, and it just circulates them, and everything revolves around them in that situation. I feel like it's a very unhealthy approach. So
I think I completely agree. I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that's one aspect of my life that I had to teach myself how to do, and that was categorize, I guess, and kind of compartmentalize the areas of my life that needed to be compartmentalized. So there's one thing that I can carry to every aspect of my life, and that's recovery, right? I can apply it at school, I can apply it at work, I can apply it at anything, relationships, whatever it may be. Anything recovery related, I can do that. However, if I am at school and I have this, say, math exam coming up, I can't, if I want to be functioning, I can't take that to work. Because when I take it to work, especially because I work in a treatment center, I work with people, they'll see that there's something on my mind. And I'll be like, oh yeah, there's this math exam that's stuck on my mind. Or I'll end up, when I have downtime at work, I have a really big tendency of taking, so say, this math exam, and then I'll study during that downtime. So so I'm studying at school, and then I'm studying at my downtime at work, in between working, and I don't give myself enough of a break, like breathe time to function, or to just center myself, and that stress just carries. And before I know it, it's the end of the day, and I'm still thinking about this stupid math exam. And because I can't, I shut it off. I can't shut it off. And that was something that I had to teach myself. And another thing too was it's okay to not worry about shit. It is okay. I had the hardest time with not letting things go. Because I thought, well, if I forget this, then it's going to happen again. Or if I forget this, then, this, and this. When in reality, I'm caught up to the best of my ability, whatever it may be. And there's always something else to do. Always something else to do.
So on kind of a low end to high end of you kind of gaining this ability that you're doing, how long would you say realistically, did it take you to feel like you had more control of yourself in a situation like that, like you're saying? That makes sense.
Yeah, I would, I'm still working on it. I still have moments where I will take stress above and beyond. But I would have to say probably, maybe the first year or two is when and getting into the flow. And then after many meltdowns, I've had several meltdowns through the years, because my way of coping with those stresses was to, get messed up in some way, shape, or form. And so I had to actually teach myself that since you can't do that anymore, you have to take breaks. You have to disconnect. You have to stop. And so after probably the first maybe 2 years or so, I have it fairly good. Fairly well. My thing now is relationships. My stressors with relationships are mind fucked.
So what would you give for both Kevin and you, and I'll answer too, but this question came to me, what advice would you give to somebody who's say for a med student, or it's struggling, just this is life, I want a little bit of a change, what recommendation or what advice, how would you give something like that in a situation?
I would say what comes to mind is while I'm listening to you guys talk is, again, for someone in early recovery, because I know, you were saying a year or two, what you're saying, when I decided to change my life and do this, a year or two sounded like an eternity to get results.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. That's kind of
That's a really good point.
But and it seemed almost like an impossible length of time to think about. But I would say the first thing you need to do is give yourself a break. You're not just quitting drinking or quitting drugs. For me, I had one of the problems that I had is, in early recovery anyway, is I would have free floating anxiety and stress, and I didn't know why. I couldn't apply it to a certain situation or a problem. I was just a wreck. I think during the first 30 days of sobriety, I cried every day. And I came to the conclusion that I wasn't only quitting drinking or quitting drugs. I was also a major addict to Xanax, so that was super fun. And but I wasn't. I needed to realize that I wasn't only quitting drinking or doing drugs. I was actually putting an old life to death. I was killing my best friend, literally having to choke it out and let it die. And that causes stress. It's going to cause mental stress and physical stress. It's hard on your body because you literally have to heal from a lot of damage that you've done. And you're here's another saying for you. One of the best things about quitting drinking and doing drugs is that you get your emotions back. And one of the worst things about quitting drinking and doing drugs is you get your emotions back. and you need to realize that it's okay to not feel okay. I use this scenario with a friend of mine, and I don't know, he said it worked. I thought it was kind of dumb, but if you take a hammer and you literally just pound on your arm over and over and over for weeks on end, and suddenly you're like, oh, this isn't right. This kind of sucks. I'm going to quit doing it, and you quit. You're going to have to heal from that. You're going to have to allow yourself to feel some of that pain. And it's okay to feel that pain, and you frankly need to feel it. And
well, I think it's like one of the reasons when I was at rehab, and I know that they do this, is like the wheel of emotions, where you make your goals in the morning time. And like, that's my advice, to try that, to be honest with yourself of when you wake up and think like, what do I really want to accomplish today? And what am I okay with not accomplishing? Like, what's my end goal? And if I wake up cranky or wake up happy, to recognize those and to stop and think, okay, this is real. This is how I am feeling at the moment. And, and at the end of the day, to kind of check in and say, well, in the morning I was happy. Then like some shitty stuff happened in the afternoon, but like it got better. And kind of like slow down. I feel like everyone's so clouded up with so much extra shit out there that it's hard to be able to kind of take that self-reflection in yourself and say like, how did you do today?
Sure.
And what difference do you want to make tomorrow? And I love that about being in rehab at that point, because it was very simple. It was like, at the very beginning, I always felt like it was like an assignment. Like you have to wake up and fill this paperwork out, and you're like, well, what do you want to feel? What do you want to be like at the end of the day? And you're just like, well, and a lot of times I'd just be comical and thought it was funny just to do stupid shit. But at the end of the day, like I really started to kind of grasp the concept of, I wish I could do this every single day. We're just so impatient with ourselves, try to wake up a little bit earlier or go to bed a little bit later to kind of like journal or reflect or talk or whatever. I think if you tap into those different sources that are out there, you really can alleviate that shitty feeling, that it's like, I'm excited to wake up in the morning, so.
Yeah, I actually wrote down a couple of things to kind of throw out, like things that I do. And you threw out another really good one, Mike, which is prioritize. Prioritize especially for students, prioritize. There are some days where I will go 1,000,000 miles an hour through the full day, and I'll get all sorts of shit done, and it'll be this super productive day, and I'll be, all proud of it. And the next day, I won't feel like doing anything.
Yeah.
And that's okay. As long as I'm not intentionally neglecting something that has to be done, my priority, obviously, my body is telling me, you need to slow down. And so I'll just kind of pick and choose a couple of small things to do, or some days I won't do anything. And I'll give myself that time to rest. And so I prioritizing is huge. Another one that I had I have a couple of tips, but the biggest ones that I have are, especially if you're in early recovery, do not jump into life too fast. That level of stress, because Kevin, you had it right. You're not just quitting drinking. You're not just quitting using. You're literally developing an entire new lifestyle. don't jump into a job ASAP if you don't have to. Don't jump into all these responsibilities ASAP if you don't have to. Take the time to figure out. I had to take the time to figure out who I am, how I function, how I deal with stress, how to deal with stress, and how to be the person that I am without falling back into those old behaviors. That was a really big one to me. And then the last one I have is ask for support, ask for help and support. One of the things, I think one of the main reasons why I'm as successful in school as I am is because I have zero ego when it comes to like assignments. So if I don't know what the hell is going on, my old self would say, "Oh, you
I
know,
know.
yeah, I know what this is. I'll figure it out." You know, and if I don't,
I'm a straight A student.
yeah, I'm not gonna ask for help. Now it's especially in some of my harder classes, my teachers don't just know me by name. Man, they know my last name. They know where I go to, like, you know, what I do for fun. They know everything. They know everything about me because they get way too much of me way too fast. Because I give it my all. And that is something that I recommend to anyone is ask for help.
Yeah.
Consistently ask for help because stress is a bitch. And we don't have to do it alone.
Yeah. Are we running out of time?
Yeah, we are actually out
I
of time.
got one more thing I want to add in on this because this has been a huge help to me. When I had that hiccup, it was about a year ago from now when I had to go to that psych ward for a weekend, my weekend stay, I call it.
The Nut Hut.
Yeah, the Nut Hut, 5150 or whatever they call it, 5050 or 50, I think it's 5150. But I got a book that I was reading, and it was Wherever You Go, There You Are. And I read the book, and it was really good. And a lot of it talks about that self-reflection to breathe and to slow down. You know, that it's going to be okay, that tomorrow will come. And that has been one of the most helpful advices that I've read or heard from anybody, is to be able to just slow down, give yourself 5 minutes, pause, and breathe. And focus on, like, because I hold my like stomach like high. I don't know, like sometimes I just like flex, like hold my stomach up. I'm driving the car, and also I'll just like let it go. And I feel like so damn good. I'm just like, why have I been driving for 40 miles and like holding my stomach way
Like
high?
this,
Like
yep.
just like notice the little things that
tension,
like your
yeah.
body does, or just like drop your shoulders, you know, higher posture or whatever. But like just the small breathing and just the deep inhales, exhales, and that slow 5-minute meditations have just been so productive for me, where I can do it. And you know, it's been funny. I've been teaching my kids, and I think I shared this a couple weeks ago with, you know, my little boy falls down. He's just like crying. I'm like, okay, he just you know, goes, Dad, I just need to breathe. And he's like doing it. I'm just like, hell yeah, you know,
Exactly.
He's getting in tune with you, because he knows him. I'm not in his head, you know.
Yeah.
So I just I like that, you know, to be able to just kind of slow down and breathe. Kevin stepped out. We're wrapping ship right now.
Yeah.
So that's my advice.
I
think the meditation,
Yeah.
and, you know, yoga or self-meditation or reading or self-care is just a huge
yeah,
thing.
removing yourself from
Yeah.
a problem. So there are so many ways to get through stress without getting high and without drinking. If you have any other questions or if you have any comments, hit us up on the Insta.
Yeah, we're rolling on it. Got some fun
Mike is our Insta
nature
man.
pictures
Yeah,
that we take all over kind of random places. We never really like intentionally like went that way, but like I just thought I like pictures. So
happened.
it's like,
Hey, nature is serene, right?
Yeah.
So, if I think that we solved our sound problem, so if
Yeah.
it is still too low, or if you can't hear what we're saying, throw us a
few people-
comment,
yeah.
message us, because we know we've been hearing that like people can't hear. So
tonight we try something a little newer. We're like 6 inches from our mics.
yeah, Kevin and Mike.
We're really close together.
Kevin and
Kevin's
Mike are
back.
practically making out right now. So
And it's fine.
Could be worse. That's how I look at it.
Well, thanks, Mike.
anyway, all right.
Right
so
on.
yeah, that wraps it up for episode 5, and we will catch you guys all next week.
Peace
So-
out.
Bye.